Welcome to the Voice of the Incomplete Skeptic, Sober Wise Guy series. Ladies and gentlemen, here I interview old timers who are, that's a phrase we use in recovery, typically people that are sober 30 years or so are my primary focus. Clean and sober is one of our favorite phrases. And the reason that I talk to people in recovery as part of the Incomplete Skeptic is about the marginalization of voices. Sometimes people in recovery are marginalized, and even within our own ranks, sometimes people think guys and gals that are sober 30 or more years are just about their egos. They assume that we don't need positive reinforcement, that we should be summarily dismissed as less important than newcomers in recovery. And, here's what I think about newcomers and old timers and the like. Newcomers are the lifeblood of the body of recovery, but old timers, metaphorically, are perhaps the backbone of recovery. But the main point of it all, there's one who has all power, and that one is God. May you find God now, sort of a thing. God is a spirit of recovery and has all power. So our opinions about each other isn't nearly as important as God's opinion of us. It's like, it's none of my business what others think of me. And ironically, it's none of my business what I think of me. My business is what God thinks of me. And I think my guest today will be in complete agreement about that, because Timothy Mark Price is a person in long-time recovery. He's a Christ follower. He has a recovery ministry, and he's got quite a voice. He sings, and Timothy, I'm just going to say welcome to the Incomplete Skeptic Sober Wise Guy series. I appreciate your being on the show.
Thank you, Timothy. Thanks for having me.
My privilege. So generally, I just want to talk about what happened. How did you get in recovery? What were you like? What happened? And what do you like now, brother? And then we'll go into your recovery ministry and etc. The floor is yours, sir.
Well, I'll set my timer. I remember the first time I told my story, it was getting to the end of the hour and I was still in third grade. My timing. I grew up in Minnesota, and I grew up in a dysfunctional home. I grew up with a lot of alcohol, a lot of drugs. My dad was constantly battling addiction, and my dad was a big part of my using in the beginning, of how I thought of myself, what was kind of instilled upon me, and my self-esteem at a young age. But he was also a big part of my recovery too. So I love that. I absolutely love that. But, even long before I picked up my first drink or took my first pill or whatever, I was an addict. And it is definitely instilled in my wiring. I'm not, my drinking and drugging did not cause my wiring. My drinking and drugging is the result of my wiring. So even without drugs and alcohol, I was reaching for other things when I was younger, be it attention, good or bad, acting out. I was a real large kid, and I had no self-esteem. I had no self-worth, and I pretty much, we went to church growing up. We went to church, but that church thing it was like kind of when, we talk about as people in recovery, when we're kind of on the verge, or when something happens, we kind of go into recovery until the heat wears off sometimes, you know what I mean? So, you wind up in jail, you're getting an ultimatum from your spouse or from your boss, or your friends are telling you or whatever. And you go, you know what, maybe there's something to this. And we kind of go into it, and I'm talking by you, I mean me, go into it half-heartedly, and it never works. So, and then the heat starts to die down. It's like, well, maybe it's not that bad. That's when we would go to church, whenever the heat was on for my dad. And my dad had problems with the law. My dad had problems with people around town. And so that was when we go to church, when mom would say, look, we're going to church, you know. And even when I was 8 years old, I went to my very first meeting as one of my, I'm, you know, some people refers to us as can I say AA brats? Because
Oh,
I
okay.
grew up around my dad would go to meetings, and if there was nobody to watch me, he'd drag me there. So I'd go into these smoke coffee filled meetings with all these guys in there trying to recover. My dad would try it. And he'd go to church, he'd do a little bit of a program, just a little bit, you know, the heat would wear off and it's like right back to where he was. So when I discovered drugs and alcohol, I was about 11 years old. And I know that's true for a lot of us, you know, and especially nowadays with the drug problem in our communities. And there's a lot of drugs that's real easy to get for young people now. It was easy for us to get it, probably, Timothy. I mean, I think we're roughly the same age, and you know, it was easy for us to get it, you know, and I think it's a lot easier now. But once I discovered anything that could change the way I thought, that would change my sober mind, that would tell me, that would stifle what I call the committee. I got the committee, and the committee are the voices in your head. So that's why I love talking about this stuff, because if we were talking to normal people, they'd haul us away when they say, oh, I got this committee in my head, you know. What are you talking about?
Mine is formed voting blocks, and,
right,
you know, so
you know, I always say, well, what's the committee? The committee is that those voices in my head that tell me I'm not good enough, constantly remind me that I'm going to be nothing more than an addict or an alcoholic, or that in a room full of 1,000 people, I'm alone, I'm a loner, I'm never going to add up. Just that, you know, that just those fear-based voices that go
the imposter syndrome, I've heard it
I
referred
like
to as
that. Yeah, that's good. That's really good. So when I discovered chemicals and I could kind of shut that committee down, it was off to the races. But like I said, I was already, even before I picked up any drugs, I already had that addictive wiring in me. So by the time I was 14 years old, I was already expelled from high school. That's when they started.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I wound up about about 3 weeks after I was expelled from high school, I wound up in inpatient treatment for drugs and alcohol when I was 14 years old. It was in the New Hope area, right off of Medicine Lake. And it was an establishment called New Pioneer House. And I think it's a Hazleton now, but it's still there. And then it didn't work. I was very young. I went, didn't really understand what was going on, but really, I didn't really want to. I didn't want to understand. I didn't want to be there. I didn't want anything to do with it. It was all foreign. I wanted to drink. I wanted to smoke. I wanted to do what I wanted to do, even at that age. So I actually wound up getting kicked out. And I'm going to fast forward, so I'm not going to give you a day-to-day by thing. But what it did for me, though, at that young age was it told me that I did have a problem. I even knew it in my head, that after that, talking to people, doing this assessment, going to see a counselor, telling about some of the things I'd gone through, I wound up believing that, yeah, I do have something wrong. So when I took that in my head and went out and started using, I drank and used like somebody that knew they shouldn't be doing it. And therefore it was over the top. It was, I'd go to a party and I'd walk in and I'd walk in and I'd yell, "Hey everybody, I'm Tim and I'm an alcoholic." And everybody would go, "Hi, Tim," at the party. Hour later, I'm passed out in a chair or on the floor. That's how I drank, you know.
That's humorous. I'd not heard that one before.
Yeah,
That's
and
good.
it was so funny when I got there and everybody's cracking up. But like clockwork,
Mhm.
I cannot, and I never have been able to drink. The only time I could ever moderate my drinking was when I would not touch it. And by moderate, I mean not drinking, period, abstaining for a certain amount of time. Usually, like I said, until the heat wore off, like for my dad, but at a very young age, to kind of, my sanctuary became my music when I was younger. And when hell was breaking loose around the house, and I don't think I'm the only one who did this. And I think a lot of people do it now. And I bet a lot of people listening did it too. We'd go into our rooms and we'd put on our headphones and escape in music. I mean, I always wore the headphones because of how my mom and dad and their arguments and their yelling. And it's like, so we're talking in the early 80s, so these big giant can headphones, but I'd go in my room and I'd listen to music. And then I bought a guitar and I would hide in my room. And that became, I became a recluse in a sense. And I would hide. And that's where I sort of, everything was kind of like, I didn't feel quite right. I didn't feel as good as other people. I didn't feel like I belonged. I felt like an outcast. And then what was going on in my house, I didn't want to hear what was going on. I wanted to close my eyes to it. I didn't want to see, there was violence. I basically wanted to hide from it. So it was kind of everything. And that was where I would hide. And that's where I would feel content and the fear would subside a little bit. But it progressed and it kept getting worse and it kept getting worse. What happened to me in high school was when I was 16, I wound up dropping out of high school. And now my life is this. My life is trying to stay clean, going over the top, trying to stay clean, in and out of different programs, recovery programs, even as a kid. Some people, if you're in recovery during high school, you may remember there were groups of kids in high school, even then, that were trying to be clean. I remember going to Gopher State Roundup in 10th grade at the Lexington,
Wow.
and staying there all weekend with, 10 kids from high school. And we'd go down there and bring our guitars and hang out and try to be clean.
Just so our audience, sorry to interrupt you, just so
Sure,
our
it's all good.
audience knows, in case you don't know what Gopher State Roundup is, it's where we have a lot of speakers come. They could be national or international recovery speakers, and they could be from disciplines of codependency or alcoholism. There's even some addicts that show up and speak, but it's like the biggest thing of the year in Minnesota.
It's
And
awesome.
yeah, so I've never heard
Going
of someone
strong.
going in a group of 10 when they weren't even sober yet, but that's interesting.
Yeah,
So
well, these are kids in school that were trying to be clean. So
mhm.
we would actually go to meetings and we'd pile into cars and go to meetings and try to be clean. But you're in high school, so people are falling off, they're getting back on. It got a little trendy, like so many things do in high school. But for me, it was real. It was, I need to try to clean up. Even at that age, I was consistently trying to, because I was getting worse and worse and worse with my drug of choice. I discovered cocaine still in high school after I had dropped out, I was asked to join a band, a traveling band. And that was my first experience with going out on the road in a band. I was 16 years old and I'm traveling with men that are in their mid 20s and early 30s. So the floodgates exploded. They didn't just open. Now I was able to get my hands on just about anything I wanted. And a lot of it was because it would just happened to be there, and it was funny because like in those days, it's like, we got to make you look older, Tim. So I try to grow a mustache and I couldn't. So like darkening my fake mustache with makeup and all this junk. But I spent about a year, but I carried that disease with me even there. And of course, in that situation, it got so bad, Timothy. It got so bad. And we're talking about men that are, again, in their mid 20s and early 30s. And they're like, we got to get rid of this kid. We're going to get in a lot of trouble. He's, it's one thing if you're there and you're kind of flying under the radar. I was a blazing drunk addict going to these clubs around Minneapolis and screaming and yelling and complaining and whining and just, how like some people get to that state when they're drinking and they just start going off about things that usually it's nonsense. That's me. I'm that guy, man. So
yeah, I was either a crying drunk or a fighting drunk, and you never knew which one was going to show up. So, and when I was a fighting drunk, I was usually beat up though. So I was not a good, I wasn't a good fighter.
Yeah.
It's easy to beat up a drunk guy. So, but anyway.
I know. And it's like me, my dad was, like I said, my dad came from a hockey background. So fighting was in his blood. And my dad bounced at Duff's downtown for many years. He bounced at different bars around the Twin Cities. There are articles in my paper about the time he punched Joe Duffy in the face, So my dad came from that kind of background, So my dad was a fighter. And when I would, still to this day, when I run into his friends, it was really cool. I've had the pleasure of my dad's passed now for 10 years. And I go to let me know if I can say this. I go to meetings around town where he used to go. And it's awesome because I get to meet a lot of his support group and everybody's like, oh yeah, that's how he was. And my dad knows, my dad and I, when it came to his recovery, I'm going to tell you why I'm able to talk about him in a few minutes. So
let me ask you a quick question. I mean, there was a guy that used to go to Roach Hall and Stillwater, and they called him Duffy. I'm wondering if it could have been him.
I don't know. He was
he always wore a one of these caps, and it was a brownish, but
I don't know. I know the Joe Duffy that I'm talking about owned nightclubs. It could be, and he would do this thing every year called Duff's Celebrity Golf Tournament.
Oh, I think it was a different guy.
Yeah, he was a BMOC man, and that's why he was in the paper for punching him. But my dad
what's a BMOC?
Big man on campus.
Oh, okay.
But my dad worked for him for years and years and years, and they were actually friends. But I would see these people that would talk about it, and I had some of that violence in me too, and so that occurred. But more than that, I was just I would just become such. I don't even know how to explain it. Just so non-thinking, nonsensical, wind up in jail every dang time for the stupid things I would do every time, and just feel like I was indestructible and untouchable.
Was it from fighting you were getting locked up, or
no,
stealing, or what?
It was, well, I had, in the end, I wound up with 3 DUIs. I wound up with drunk and disorderly.
You ever been to a MAD panel?
I haven't. Mothers Against Drunk Drivers.
Driving. Yeah.
I haven't.
Okay.
And I probably
Curious.
should. It might be a
Mhm.
good thing to do, but I was in and out of jail often. I never went to prison, but I was in and out of jail quite
Mhm.
often. And possession, um, just doing dumb things, just driving off the road, driving over the median to get to an exit, and then going over the other side medium at like
Goodness.
90 miles an hour
Wow.
and getting pulled over. And it's like, what are you doing? I don't know. They take the car away and haul me off. I just, I, I don't get it. I don't get it, but it's what I do. I become something I'm entirely not, like a lot of us do,
Mhm.
and so to kind of fast forward, um, I wound up with 3 DUIs, and I wound up in treatment for a total of 3 times
Where'd you do
before.
your treatments other than
They were
your
in
time in your house?
Minneapolis, right
Okay.
off of Chicago from the state,
Oh, the
because
park or
I think so, yeah.
okay.
Um, it was recommended as part of what do you call it?
Supervise or probation?
Yeah, my probation, and oh yeah, along with going to the driver's school and all of that. So I did. I wound up.
PSI, pre-sentence investigation.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I haven't heard that for a while.
Hmm.
But
I don't know how I know it.
I wound up, and then in the end, with all of this stuff, I wound up in I toured for 10 years after doing a lot of this stuff, not with the first band I'd mentioned, but I wound up touring and out on the road around the United States for 10 years, doing exactly what you would think a young man in a traveling rock band would be doing. That's the easiest way to explain it, and I wound up for the last couple years that I was touring while I was using. I wound up in Las Vegas and playing exclusively for Steve Wynn properties. And so, if you're unfamiliar with Steve Wynn, he owns the Mirage and Wynn and Treasure Island, and as far as I know, he still owns them. And that was a big deal back then. So I was making a dumb amount of money. I was in Las Vegas, lived for free at the Mirage.
Hmm.
Didn't We would play, for instance, I lived on the 11th floor, and if I went, for instance, to Palm Desert to the Marriott that I think he owned or whatever, my room would sit and wait for me, just like everybody in the band, because it was like having an apartment at the hotel. So no overhead, didn't have to pay for food, and making a good amount of money. And it was the most miserable I was in my whole life.
Hmm.
Going in debt, doing a lot of cocaine. That's when I started smoking crack, when I was on the road.
Wow.
Well, it was easier because I got into freebasing cocaine for a while, and just buying crack and buying a rock was easier, just to buy the rock and put it in your pipe. And sometimes it was even easier to find. But when I got fired from that gig, and I'm surprised they kept me on for as long as they did. I was with them for almost 2 years, a little over 2 years. And my dad got me back because of these things again that I was doing. One thing I remember was, just a couple of the highlights was when everybody had come back to Minnesota around this area for a week off. I had stayed because Sam Kinison was coming, and I wanted to go see Sam Kinison at what was Don Laughlin's Riverside Casino. That's where he died. He was on his way to that when
Wow.
he had the car wreck. So the whole thing was canceled, blah blah blah. It really didn't have anything to do with anything. But when they got back, people were like, where's Tim? Where has he been? And when you stay at the same, in Laughlin, we stayed at a hotel, not at the Mirage. Where's Tim been? And it's like, well, I haven't seen him for a couple of days. I had pretty much barricaded myself in my room, and wound up getting That was my drug problem because I got drugged to a meeting. I wound up getting dragged to a meeting. And if I remember correctly, it was in the Mojave Desert, which is in that area. And I had the DT so bad, everybody was filling me full of honey and orange juice to try to stop the DTs. And it's like, and then it's before that, the police had found me and I had passed out on a dirt mound at a construction site in Las Vegas. I have no idea how these happen, how I get there, totally always in a blackout. And they went, it's same thing. When I was 16, this guy's too dangerous. He's going to kill himself. So they contacted my dad, who they knew was my dad now has been in recovery for a while. And during this, my dad used to fly out and, I'm trying to keep it together in a concise story. He would fly out because he knew how much like him I was. So he said, "Oh, I'm going to fly out to Vegas and spend a couple days with you, Tim." When what he was doing was he was kind of coming out to make sure that, old Tim was being okay.
Lived through it at least. Yeah.
Yeah. Bless his heart. And then, so they contacted him and he got me home and then, he said I could stay with him as long as I was clean, and I wasn't clean. And then I wound up in Atlanta because I wanted to get closer to Nashville, and I wound up getting another DUI down there, and I discovered cocaine down there. And this is where God really kicks in. So I kind of tell a bit of the bad, because we know when you hear the bad and you either experience the bad or understand the bad, it makes the good all that better. When these great things happen to us as a result of God and recovery, because I still believed in God while I was doing all of this stuff. I don't know why. I never not believed in God. I don't know why. I just always did. I've always believed in my heart that God is there. And even in those years of partying, those late night partying, when everybody does drugs and gets all philosophical, it's like, I'm like, I believe in God, and it's like, I believe, and I always felt bad for people who didn't, because even in that state of my life, I knew they were missing out on something. And I always felt sorry for people who didn't believe in God. That's just, again, that's part of my wiring. I don't know why I was wired or am, because I'm still that way. But what had happened was, this is the big turning point. When after I was in Atlanta and moved there, I basically got my third DUI, and I was, for the most part, living in my car. And my car got impounded. So my house got impounded. So my house got impounded, and my brother was letting me stay on his couch. Oh, I got a couple running around too. He or she.
This is Jimi Hendrix.
I love it.
Looks just like him, right? He's been around bumping my leg so much, you probably see me keep going like this because he. Sorry to interrupt you, but I thought I'd
he's
introduce
a big
him.
boy. I love it. That looks just like him. Oh, it's awesome. I love cats.
Yeah, he I think they were playing Jimi Hendrix when he was born or something. I don't know. So figure if your cat comes in, feel free to introduce your cat. So anyway,
I love it. I wish mine was here. So
thanks for letting us interrupt, God.
Yeah. So I'm at that place that we come to so many times. And I'd come there many times in my life before, like I said, in and out of treatment, in and out of jail, in and out of meetings, in and out of, but I could never accumulate more than 90 days. I just never could. I just never could. I never could, or never wanted to, sometimes that's the way to put it, or tried to do things like Tim wanted to do it, because Tim is so capable when we talk about, especially with acceptance and about wanting to run the show and what I'm expecting from others. And I'm expecting I can run my own treatment program and my own recovery, and I can do it. And I can be Sam Malone and go work at a bar and serve drinks and be uber cool and never think about it. I can't. I'm not that guy. Remember, it's my wiring. My wiring is I don't want to say flawed, because it's this wiring has given me so much in life now, So I was at that place where I didn't want to live and I didn't want to die. I didn't want to drink and do drugs, but I didn't want to quit. I was consumed by fear. I was pretty close to jumping into the abyss, I was staying on my brother's couch. My car was impounded. I didn't have much money coming in, obviously. I sold almost all of my gear just so I could keep using. I have one guitar that's still with me now that I've had the whole time. And I was to the point where every time I drank, my drinking got so unpredictable. I'd black out every time. I couldn't drink without blacking out. So I started buying, I couldn't afford Coke. I couldn't afford Crank or anything like that. So I'd get White Cross and I'd crunch it up and with a quarter and I'd snort it, because I couldn't drink without going into a blackout. And if I did drugs like that, it would keep me from going into a blackout, at least until the drugs wore off, and then I'd become a puddle. So, and my shaking was extremely bad. Like I said, I was at that place, and I know a lot of people know that place. It's, we often call it rock bottom, but I'm telling you, I think even when we hit bottom, we're still capable of going even further down. I always say rock bottom oftentimes has a trap door. And but that's where I was. And I was out and I was doing my normal drinking. I had no friends. I had nobody to hang around with. My brother had gone out and he wouldn't let me hang around with him and his friends because of how I drank and how I drugged. So nobody wanted me around. And he felt sorry for me. And he goes, "Do you want to come with us?" And I went, "Sure." And I went with them, and they went out on the town in Atlanta. And we went to a club, and you may recognize the name. It was called Rupert's.
I've heard of it.
They had one here too. They had two of them in the United
Yeah,
States,
okay.
one here and one in Atlanta. If they had more, I don't know. And I was in there, and Timothy, something hit me, man. And I wasn't drunk. I was drinking, but I wasn't drunk. And it was a Saturday, and I wasn't a weekend warrior. I was every day. I used to have to drink just to stop my shaking, and I wasn't above stealing alcohol. I wasn't above stealing NyQuil. I wasn't above stealing anything that would calm my nerves and stop the shaking. Going up to the local gas stations and buying, they used to sell ephedrine, called them Eppies. And I think they stopped selling them because it became one of the main ingredients in meth. But you used to be able to go to the gas station and buy them in bottles. Buy a bottle for like $6. Whole bottle of like 100. And they're a White Cross. That's what it was. Truck stops. These are things you learn when you're on the road, how to get these things and how to drive for hours on end if you can't find an 8-ball. And I went into the men's room and I started crying. And I don't know where I didn't know where it was coming from. And I went into the men's stall and I slammed the door and I kind of put my head up against the wall. And here's where people think I'm nuts, is that I honestly believe God talked to me. I honestly believe God talked to me. And what God showed me was my past. And he showed me in a way that I understood the damage. Because over the years, with multiple interventions, treatment, recovery meetings, in and out of church, people trying to help, so often sitting in a room like that with other people, they would almost plead, don't you see the damage you're doing? Don't you see what you're doing, not to yourself, but you're creating that rippling effect that's taking out everybody around you? Because that's what addiction does. It doesn't just take out the individual, it takes everybody out. And once it takes us out, it goes for our family. It creates that ripple effect. That's how the enemy works. But I understood. For a fleeting second, I understood, and I saw what I had been doing to myself and the people around me. And then it was kind of like a Christmas carol. God showed me my future, which was right, or my present, which was right there. And then he showed me my future, and I had nothing to do with it. I had nothing to do with it. And basically God said, you're done. You are done. No more. And here's why. This is why I know it was God. Because 30 years later, I haven't had a drop. I haven't taken a hit. I haven't snorted a line. I haven't based. I haven't drank. I haven't, ever since that moment. God gave me direction. And I know people will call it, and I think this is true for everybody. I don't think it takes any special person or anything, to have, we've heard the term a moment of clarity. And I think it's so much bigger than that. I think it's a divine intervention. And I think God gives the divine intervention opportunity sometimes more than once to everybody who's struggling with this. But I think the question is, do we recognize it, that we're given that opportunity? Because when I talk to many people, I wholeheartedly believe in God. I'm a follower of Jesus Christ. I believe in Jesus Christ. I believe that is ultimately what saved me, is that what it did was, at that time when that happened, God removed my obsession to drink. Okay. And hear me out on this. Hear me out, because this is what I believe. I believe God removed that obsession to drink, the craving to drink, also removed the obsession for drugs, the craving for drugs, and what I thought was a need for drugs. I believe wholeheartedly that was removed from me. However, in God's infinite wisdom, the obsession and the cravings were removed, but they left me with Timothy. They left me with Tim, and that's where the problem is, because the drugs and the alcohol, even though they were what was going to kill me, at one time, they were but a symptom of what I am and who I am. But what was so great about this is, once the drugs and the alcohol were removed, and I really, honestly, after all of that, after 20 years of being out there, well, maybe you never were an alcoholic or an addict if you feel the obsession and the craving was taken away. Jack, I was I was the alcoholic, the drug addict. But when, again, in God's infinite wisdom, by removing that obsession, now God has been able to come in. And when I start looking at these things in my lives, when I start looking at things like, we had talked a little bit about expectations, or Timothy, you and I did for a couple seconds before we went on, or acceptance, or about, where our lives are going, or trusting God, with the outcome, all of that stuff, I wouldn't have been capable of doing without God's help and without taking action and working that program, be it whatever the program is for you. My program was working a 12-step recovery program. I actually work the 12-step recovery program through the Life Recovery Bible now, which is awesome. And if you need to edit it, go ahead and edit it. I want to say, though, it is a
No,
great.
go for it.
Okay, cool. This is a great Bible. Our ministry, Faith Recovery Music, has given away over 400 of these around
Wow.
the country. And what they do is they do the 12 steps in a biblical basis. And what's so cool about it is when you can look at these people that were men and women 2,000 years ago, 2,000 years plus, same as us, same thing. They're just like us. Technology's changed, but I don't know how much we've really changed, and when they start talking about, believing that through Christ and by taking action, I can have a conversion like Saul did to Paul. I can have that conversion. I can trust that my past, which is one of the things that got in my way so many times. And I know being in the rooms of recovery for, honestly, after being an AA brat, I mean, we're talking 40 years, being in the rooms, we know there are things we need to do. We need to take action, and we need to, in these steps, we need to, surrender. I surrender to God. But I also know my life on my own and my own understanding, I need God to keep my path straight. When I lean on my own understanding, I fall. But I also have learned that, and you want to hear something, Timothy, is that
Yeah.
most of this stuff that I'm talking about right now, I've been like you. I've got that long time recovery. No. I'm gonna say it like this. Like you, well, like a lot of people, I've been clean and sober for a long time. I haven't picked up anything, but I've gone through phases, man, where even in recovery, man, it's like when I was out on the road, my whole thing was, man, it was all about getting what I wanted, and when you think about our lives, in that we talk about being selfish and self-centered, I can honestly say that I was, because my life, and I have no problem saying it, my life was about getting drugs, getting alcohol, living the lifestyle I wanted to do. Uh, I was a womanizer. I manipulated people. And it's not the misunderstanding that I think a lot of people who aren't in recovery or are kind of looking at people in recovery is that it doesn't just become while you're intoxicated or wasted. That self-centeredness becomes our lives, because it's like, oh my gosh, I could either spend this $100 and get a gram of Coke, or I could put it towards groceries. I want to put it towards the cocaine. So I'm going to go use somebody, and maybe they'll let me stay at their house. Maybe they'll wash my clothes, sleep on their couch, so I can use my money for drugs. And I'm using people. I'm doing this. man, I would go to people, I'd stay at their house, I would go to different towns and cities and go there, and it was almost like I expected them to take me in, to feed me, to pamper me, to buy me lunch and to do this. And that's how my ego got. Oh, my ego was so huge. But even, and then all of this, we're playing for Steve Wynn, and he's coming in. He handpicked the band out of Sun Valley, Idaho, and he's showing up. He brings Sean Cassidy one night. He brings Sylvester Stallone. Hey, come and watch the band. We're sitting down. They're like, we're gonna, what do you need for gear? We're gonna put together this. Man, my ego just off the charts, And it's like, I'm the guy in the band that they want to fire because of my drug addiction and my use. But man, not then in my head. My head is like, oh man, it's all about me. But that was the problem, and that it's all about me. I can do whatever I want to do. And I would get these phone calls that would come. We would usually play from like 10 to 4 in the morning in Vegas. And I'd get the phone call around noon that would say, do you remember what you did last night? And I would always have to say no. I would get that pinch that goes up the back of your neck when somebody's about to tell me yet another stunt that I've pulled in the midst of a blackout. And they told me how after doing Rumpelman shots, I sat on the bar stool and tried to tell Mr. Wynn how to run Las Vegas. And then I fell down and his bodyguard had to carry me up to my room, So I'm getting all this stuff. Had to get the call where they said, you got to go to the security office. Imagine being in a blackout in a public place where there's cameras everywhere, like Las Vegas. Your band has carte blanche at the places you play. They can drink. They can go up. They can have tap beer and well drinks. You get called to the office and they make you sit in this room with a bunch of TV screens and they show you what you were doing last night. And you get to see and watch yourself in a blackout. My jaw just hit the ground. And it's like, I'm literally watching myself yell at people and scream and spill drinks. And I have no idea, I get in those drunken states. I think everybody around me is in a drunken state. Nobody, it's just me. And you see people looking at you like this and shaking your heads. I got to go watch that video. And then guess what? They took away the band's carte blanche to drink and eat for free. I think that's when they fired me. You don't ever want to do that to a traveling band.
Right.
But all of this stuff, I was always chasing that golden carrot. I always wanted that. I was always telling myself that I'm going to get this record deal. I'm going to do this. And I justified my existence as being, I'm on this journey to succeed. And it's like, it's the whole thing, it's, I'm living that lifestyle. I wanted a record deal. I wanted the money. I wanted all of that stuff. And the fact is I would have killed myself. And the fact is, as much as my ego told me I deserved it, I didn't. There are people out there who work real hard to get to those places. And there's people who don't too. But I surely would have done myself in. But where I'm going with this is, even in recovery, I chased that golden carrot. And the difference was I became of the mentality that now if I don't succeed, I have nothing to blame it on. So now it's got to become do or die. And I went through that whole perfection thing for a long time, where I felt like everything I was learning in recovery wasn't saying, and it says all over the place, progress, spiritual progress. For me, it's seeking God. Even then, but it was still more about seeking what Tim wanted, even after I had put the stuff down. God had given me my life back, And in a sense, I was kind of turning around and spitting at him saying, thanks a lot. Now I'm going to go back to trying to get that golden carrot now that I'm clean and sober. And you know what? We've heard the analogy of what happens when you take the booze away from a drunken horse thief. We wind up with a horse thief, you know? And that's kind of where I was going. I was doing the same thing. I was living in fear. The committee was back. This is after being clean. And over a couple years, all of this stuff started kind of creeping back into my life. And you know, when I went in and God saved me that night before, that next day, you want to hear a miracle? So
Absolutely.
here's my, okay, so here's my brother's apartment where I'm staying. And here's the main road. Okay, does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So here's the apartment, here's the main road. Here's one entrance to the apartments, here's the other entrance. If I would walk literally not even a quarter mile to the exit of the apartments, it was an AA clubhouse with meetings almost 24/7.
Wow.
I crawled there the next day. I didn't know for sure it was. I had a hunch. And then when I crawled and got there and walked in the back and I saw the emblem, I'm like, oh yeah. And then if you would go the other way, it was a church called North Springs. And I started going to that church. And both of these places were so pivotal in my faith and my recovery. And as a matter of fact, so here I got a temporary sponsor the next day. I started doing the things that I'd never do before. I don't need a sponsor. I don't need to go through the steps. I'm Sam Malone. I'm just going to quit. That's the lie that the committee tells me. That's the enemy telling me that I can do it on my own. I don't need any help. I don't need anything. So for the longest time, even though God saved me, and I would say, thank you, Lord. I'm not getting on my knees. I'm not doing the things that I probably should have been doing. I was doing them when I would go to meetings. I'd say the Lord's Prayer. And then the more I went to church, the more it was getting instilled. But the whole thing in the back of my head, Tim still wanted what Tim wanted. And that's okay. I mean, there's nothing wrong. One of the greatest things we get in recovery is the ability to have hopes and dreams. We get to have our dreams. But the thing is, my dreams took priority over everything else. And it became do or die. I want to achieve this. I'm going to get this. And I'm right back to manipulating people and doing all of the things I had done before. And it started again to catch up with me. And it took a few years because I wasn't drinking and I was going to meetings, but I stopped going to anything that had anything to do with recovery, like church, like meetings. I stopped calling my sponsor, who, by the way, talked to yesterday morning, has been my sponsor for 29 years. You got to get him on the show. Woo! Oh my gosh, he's amazing. So
you have to hook us up. We have 22.
I would love to. I would love to. So I'm being told, you know, it's like when I first came in, like so many of us, who ever heard the thing? You got nothing to lose.
So what's a sponsor for those that might not know?
So a sponsor is somebody like a mentor. It's somebody that can guide you through your recovery. If you are part of like Alcoholics Anonymous, they may bring you through the 12 steps of that program. They may ask you to go to meetings. They may do this. They may work on with you one-on-one. They share their experiences, their strengths, their hopes, which we've heard a lot, but they also share, you know, I think it's important that a lot of times we share the things that not only almost killed us, but the things that also saved us, you know, and we get so much out of that. That's what a sponsor's always been to me. And I've always been, before, when I would, you know, fall off and not get past 90 days, I always felt awkward getting a sponsor. Don't feel awkward. Get a sponsor. It takes a lot of guts to do that, to raise your hand and say, I need a sponsor, man. I got to talk to somebody. I got to get this stuff out of me, man, because that stuff, man, that we might think is normal thinking, that is one of the greatest things that God has given me in recovery. I'm going to tell you what that is, but I'm going to cap this off so it makes sense. So I'm told by this temporary sponsor that I have nothing to lose. You have no car, your car's impounded, you have no money, you have no job, you're sleeping on a couch, you have restraining orders against you, against other people. Why would you not try this? And it penetrated my thick skull. I went, I don't have anything to lose. So here's the irony. So 12 years later into my recovery, all of this other stuff that I'm talking about is now starting to catch up. I'm not as bad as I was when I was using, but I'm still pretty selfish. And I still want a lot of what Tim wants. And I'm still trying to chase that golden carrot. I'm touring in a band all around the United States again, and not really working with other people. You know, I'm too busy, I'm traveling. You know, I'm in a band, I'm touring, I don't have time, you know, and not doing the things that I need to be doing, that for some reason it's either my committee or my stinking thinking is telling me that I don't need to do this. Now let this sink in. So in the beginning, when I have absolutely nothing to lose, I'm willing to try it. Fast forward 12 years later, I have a house, I have a wife, I have a kid, I actually have a job, I'm paying a mortgage. That's when my head starts telling me it's time to stop working a program of recovery.
Mhm.
Let that sink in. That is not the time to stop working. Well, I've got over 10 years, and since I got over 10 years, I've fallen into that rigmarole. I've fallen into that state of, I just don't drink. I just don't drink. So therefore, I can continue. And I had a complete and total meltdown. And thank God my wife called my sponsor, the same gentleman I'm talking about now, who literally drove to my house and said, why aren't you going to meetings? He'd see through all of my horse hockey, no matter what I'd say.
That's
He'd
one of the
say,
things sponsors can do. They can see around corners we can't. They
yeah,
have a saying, you know, you can't BS a BSer and you can't con a con, you know.
yeah. And we need that sometimes because
Mhm.
we start to believe our own craziness, you know? And he's like, I talked to your wife. You're going to a meeting with me right now. And I'm like, well, it is like, and
Excuse
I
me.
look at my wife and it's like, she's, you know, you could kind of tell with the look that it's the
Mhm.
ultimatum look again that I haven't, it's like, okay, I'm going to a meeting, you know? So we go to a meeting, and all the time while we're driving there. Now, like I said, I still believe in God. I've always believed in God, but I'm not doing anything for God. I'm not doing anything to be of service. I'm not doing these things to maintain a healthy recovery. I am trying to live that Sam Malone recovery. I'm playing in bars again in this band. So I'm
Mhm.
around alcohol all the time, nightclubs, resorts, back in Vegas again, all of the same things. And but I didn't use because I don't know why. I don't know why I didn't. I think it's because I was too terrified. But and I'm thinking this, well, he's driving me to the meeting. He's talking to me. I'm going to that place that we go to a lot where his talking sounds like, mar, 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 mar. It's not penetrating my 6-inch cranium. And I'm thinking, well, I went to AA I went to a meeting, and I tried recovery, and my life got better, but I also came in as a drunk and a drug addict. So if I put down the drugs and the booze, isn't my life just going to automatically get better? Isn't the fact that I'm not going to get another DUI going to make my life better? Well, of course it is, obviously, but that's surface stuff, you know? So I'm driving, I'm going, well, I'm not drinking now and I'm not doing this. How's it going to do anything for me now? Oh my gosh. It was again like the floodgates opened up, and I went to that meeting, and I've my sponsor he's a strong Christian, and he opened that God door for me. And he's like, you're just as bad now as when you came in. You're still that horse thief. You're just as bad. And that point, my committee was so bad in my head, telling me, ruminating over thoughts, ruminating over, not being perfect, ruminating that I can't get this deal, I can't do this, just chopping me into little bits all day long, slap, 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 all day long. And I didn't think I had a choice. I thought whatever my head said, I had to believe it. I go to this meeting and I start feeling, just from sitting in a meeting with all these other people who are trying to get better, all of a sudden I started feeling better. And I right there, I'm like, I need to get this back in my life. God has given me another chance. And I'll tell you another thing, even when I was using the worst I was using, I never, ever once, ever contemplated seriously about suicide. But when I was clean for a long time, and my committee got real bad, and my thoughts got real bad, and I couldn't medicate, I couldn't calm the committee with a drink, I couldn't escape my brain with a chemical, I wanted to kill myself. That was the only time in my life where I actually almost killed myself, was when I was clean, but I wasn't working any kind of program of recovery. And it was all about Tim and what Tim wanted, and what Tim wants, and where Tim wants, what he thinks right. And when I think my ego is the way it should go in this, and selfish and self-centered, I can't live like that. I can't live like that. It is a scary, scary place for me to go when I don't trust in God. And I start to think about the world and what's going on in the world, and how the world's problems are my problems. And, something's happening in another country, and it's like, I'm wearing that like a 2-ton backpack, and I'm thinking of these things that I got no control over. I'm worrying about my health. My health's fine. My thoughts when I was out using got so bad, and I hate saying this, my thoughts got so bad in my ruminating and my committee, that for a long time I thought I had AIDS, and I was too chicken to do anything about it because of the lifestyle I was living and what I was doing and going out. But I was so afraid, and I'm so important in this, that there's no way I'm going to do it. That was one of the first things my temporary sponsor made me do. He said, if you're carrying around anything of heavy baggage, you have got to get rid of it. And I know we do this like in the Life Recovery Bible, we do it through the fourth step, and we start taking all of these things. It's that act of confession and getting it out. He said, you no less than anything have to go to the doctor and show your committee and your head that you're fine. You need this victory. And I'm like, well, in first place, I go, well, what if I have it? Then he goes, then you have it. Go. And I went, and of course I didn't have it. And that caused me to drink and drug to no end, because I walked around with this paranoid cloud above me all the time. And I would drink one drink, and all of a sudden all those crazy thoughts would go away. But I'm an alcoholic and I can't drink one drink. And the floodgates open up. When I walked out of that meeting, I knew that's what I needed to do. And I tell you how I know God was there. And this has stuck with me. And I actually use this in the ministry. So there was this gentleman there after my sponsor brought me to the meeting. And he was a Southern gentleman. And there is this really cool quality to a lot of Southern gentlemen that have a draw. and I just love it, you know, and just smart as the dickens, you know, but because of the way they talk, you know, you just get that laid back kind of approach. And, you know, you don't really, when you talk to somebody like that, you know, you sometimes forget how smart these people are. And he looks at me and he pulled a church lady on me. So what's a church lady? A church lady is this: you haven't been to church for a long time, and that lady comes up to you and goes, well, Tim, I haven't seen you in church for a long time, you know, and you're like, yeah, well, it's good to see you. So they get the little dig in, right? So that's the truth. He comes up to me and he goes, well, hey, Tim. And I'm like, hey, I won't say his name. He goes, you know, it's been a long time since I've seen you in the rooms of recovery. Well, how you doing? And I said, well, you know, I'm doing good. I'm working hard. Lying. I'm going to church. Lying. You know, I'm working. I spend a lot of time with my family. Lying. You know, and I said, you know, I'm just kind of coasting along. Exact words I said. Just kind of coasting along. This guy didn't miss a beat, man. He looks at me and then he looks down at his feet. And he looks at me and he goes, you know, Tim, you can only coast downhill. And I went, what? And I went, he's right. When we work a program of recovery, we don't have 3 speeds. We don't have forward, backwards, and stop. We've got forward and backwards. Because when we step away from our recovery, now that doesn't mean like some days you may get too busy and you can't get to maybe a recovery meeting somewhere, or sometimes things happen. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about an ongoing, consistent plan. And we know even when you have an ongoing, consistent plan of going to work, you have 6 days, and sometimes stuff just happens. I'm talking about an onward plan with God, with our Savior, and with our recovery, because when we stop, we're actually going backwards. Because when we stop, we start moving away from that path. And that path can be our path of faith. The further we get away from our path, the less we're going to work our faith. And I always talk about in the infinite wisdom of God and Jesus Christ, that's how I built my relationship. When they said, I'm going to remove that obsession, but I'm going to leave you with Tim. And then my pain is great enough that it makes me seek out Jesus Christ. It makes me seek out that his promises, to know that I'm forgiven, that those things that I did in my past, man, you know who's keeping them alive? I am. You know, that doesn't mean we may have to do jail time. I've done jail time, or we have consequences of those, but Christ has forgiven us. And if Christ can forgive us, we need to forgive ourselves. It's part of a program of recovery, no matter what, even working through the Life Recovery Bible, that we ask people to forgive us, because it's important that they forgive us so we can move on. The truth of the matter is not everybody's going to. I have people that I wish they'd forgive me, but I pulled too many stunts, and that's their right not to forgive me. But I did do what I was supposed to do. I did approach them not with an apology, but with an amends. And amends is different than an apology. And amends is like an apology on steroids, where they actually see what you're doing. It's like, how many apologies did we make in the past? Oh, I'm sorry, I'll never do it again. Oh man, I can't believe I promise never to do that again. And the next day we're doing it again, you know, because we're fallible men and women. And a lot of us battle with addiction and alcoholism, and we battle with the enemy. We battle with our committee. We battle with our own stinking thinking quite often, you know, and when we're battling that stuff, that's before we know, it's like, you know, we may surrender, but that doesn't mean we give up. And we don't understand that when we're knee deep in this stuff. It's more, you know, how surrender is sometimes the greatest gift we can have, by letting go of something. But usually when we're in that state, we're not really capable of that. I know I wasn't, you know, you maybe. And once again, when I say you, us, or we, I'm talking about me and what happened with me. And man, it was like God spoke to me again after all of this stuff. Boy, you're getting the whole story. I hope I'm not wearing you out.
Oh no,
And
we're good.
I got to the point where I went to go get this few years back, I went to go get my 25-year medallion. And I'd been thinking and thinking and thinking about working my program. After that had happened, it's like it scared me, Timothy, to the point of like, man, I want what God's offering me. I want to be able to have this life. And all of a sudden, then you start realizing like how the simplest of things are the greatest of things. That golden carrot that I thought was the end all be all, nothing but a lie. It was a big lie filled with glitter, glam, and gold. And I fell for it, hook, line, and sinker. And I wanted it. And I wanted to be that guy that everybody respected and, you know, have those people falling at your feet going, oh my gosh, he's the greatest. And that's where my ego went, you know, and everybody loves you, and, you know, and you just, that's, you know, the same way you think if I have a couple drinks, I become James Bond. Not so. It's not so. I am not James Bond after a couple drinks. Never was, no matter what my committee tells me. And, but I went and I got my 25-year medallion, and I'd been working a program, and I felt more like I was growing closer and closer to God. I stopped touring and I went to work for a mega church in Atlanta as a musician. And God started working through me that way. And all of a sudden, you know, I'm going to church every Sunday, but I'm part of a bigger picture, because one conversation I had with my sponsor early on at a Waffle House, because we're in the South, was I don't know how I can be happy if I can't do a lot of the things that I could do when I was drinking. And he's like, what do you mean? Well, I want to play music. And he's like, and I said, there's no way at this point of my recovery, this was way back when, I can't step foot in the bar. I won't make it. And he started suggesting, and this is like not long after I first started, and you start thinking, why does this guy want to help me? What's his angle? You know? And you know, it's our as addicts and alcoholics in our upbringing, sometimes we have a suspicious nature, you know, and sometimes we go to that. I'm like, what does this guy really want from me? You know, he's being so nice to me. He's buying me breakfast at the Waffle House. And he goes, well, what do you want to do with music? And I said, I really don't know. I don't know what to do. He goes, have you ever thought of this is a big God moment. He goes, have you ever thought about teaching? And I went, not really. He goes, could you teach? And I said, you know, I probably could. I know enough, you know. And he pulls out $100 bill and he goes, how many lessons will this get my daughter? And I'm thinking, what does this guy want? You know, it's like, I don't know, 4 lessons. I'm going to give you this $100. Here's where I live. Can you show up this day and date and give her 4 lessons? And I went, absolutely. And I did it. And all of a sudden I wound up teaching at a local music store. And that was a big part of what wound up me meeting a lot of these people. The gentleman who hired me at the church that I went for, who is on the board of directors for this ministry that I'm involved with. And then when his daughter got married, he invited me to play guitar for her wedding, and I played Canon in D as they walked down the aisle. And you
Cool.
see, isn't that cool when you see those miracles, how they work for us and how they all come together? And, you know, and I looked at that medallion. I'm like, I'm doing a lot. I can be doing more. I know I can be doing more. And, you know, I felt that call from God, and I kind of looked at my medallion and it kind of glistened. And in that little glisten, it was like the whole plan for this ministry idea came into my head. And I am not smart enough to come up with a plan like this. So it's like, I think this is what God is calling me to do. Now I know my head is capable of going places. And so I sought counsel. I sought counsel with my wife. I sought counsel with two pastors. I sought counsel with my sponsor, who I'm talking about. And then I sought counsel with the biggest gate of them all, my mother-in-law. And they all agreed that this ministry is what I should be doing, and I got to tell you, I ghosted God for years, man. God be calling me up saying, I want you to do this. Oh no, and I used to say, I'm not the guy to do it because of how broken I am.
You should
But
create a song, Ghosted God. That sounds like a great
yeah, you get that, don't you? I mean, and it's like, and then
God didn't ghost us.
We ghosted God. And that's exactly right. I ghosted God.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, I'm broken. I can't do this. And it's like, well, God's like, come on, that it's through broken people that I work with. Look at the disciples. Look at the people I work with in the Bible. Look at your sponsor. Look at the people we reach out to. I could talk to you about something. We've known each other for a couple hours now. And I bet I could bring up 5 things right off the tip of my head. And it's going to be like we've known each other for years, because we have similar paths. And a lot of times we're connected through our brokenness. So God's like, don't give me that. The truth is you want to play Led Zeppelin and AC/DC. I'm like, you're right. God's right. And then I thought, if I do this, I'm giving up everything. I'm giving up everything to make this ministry my life. And I'm here to tell you, gang, when God's involved and we feel like we're giving something up, this is one of the greatest paradoxes of recovery. I've been doing this ministry for about 6 years. And I feel like even though I've been clean and sober with long-term recovery or long-term sobriety, I feel like the last 6 years has truly been my recovery, and where it's not about that carrot on a stick. It's about something bigger. It's about God. It's about, you have your battles. The enemy will give you a battle or two, especially when you're doing good. When you see it working in people's lives, you get the battle of, oh my gosh, people think I'm doing this for myself. And it's like, well, are you? And it's like, you know what I'm using the gifts that God gave me. And I think I can reach people with those gifts. More importantly, I think God thinks I can reach people. I went in my recovery for a while. I went back to school to become a drug and alcohol counselor. And both my dad and my sponsor said, you got to be real careful when you do that. So it doesn't interfere with your own personal recovery. And if you're okay with that, it's just, I think you get fair warning. And then both of them said, I think you can reach more people with your story and your music and with what you're doing. And it always made me feel good, even though my committee would battle me on that. When I started doing that, God opened this ministry up, knowing that the bottom line is it's got to be above everything else about God and God's plan. And
the smaller I get, the bigger God gets, or the
amen.
bigger God gets. Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
And my sponsors said, if God removed all my defects of character, I'd disappear. And that's kind of the point of it all, is that we do want to be the hole in the donut, because if the more space we take up personally, the less space God is going to be able to shine. And God can shine in anything, and God can break the rock and water will come out of it. God will break the dawn and the darkness and everything in our lives that is broken, God grows and shines through. And sometimes the light breaks from the inside and we break open from the inside out. Sometimes we got to get nailed from the outside in, but either way, it changes who we are on the inside.
Yeah.
And it is an inside job, And
I like that
so,
too.
I think our various ministries, call them what you will. My sponsor used to call MAD my ministry. She said, "MAD is your ministry." I said, "Oh, I never thought of it that way." And it's like in God's economy, nothing is wasted. So, all the things that happen in our lives, they overlap. There's synchronicities, and you referred to it as a ripple effect. Good, bad, or in between. Everything has I'm going to say a music to it because you're a
Sure,
musician.
I like that.
Yeah, everything has a symphony attending to it, and the angels are constantly singing praise to God.
Yeah,
And sometimes we can hear it, sometimes we can't. But but sometimes we have an expectation as to what that music sounds like, and if something doesn't fit into our paradigm, we may not get it. So they have a thing that's called the set aside prayer. Are you familiar with it?
I'm not, but I want to be.
The set aside prayer is where we ask God to help us set aside everything we think we know about God so we can learn something more,
Ooh,
you know? So, and, until we die to self or die to selfishness, if you will, we'll still be about ourselves. It'll still be all about us somehow. And we're human. We're going to end up
right,
doing that
right.
at some level, and when we're dead, that's when our mission is over. So, and but we're getting close to closing time here, but you said a few things that I resonated with that were of striking importance, and loving God is a number one, and loving others as we love ourselves. In so many
Right,
words, I'm
right,
paraphrasing, but if we love God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength, how do we have room left to love others or ourselves? Right. So it seems paradoxical,
right.
but it's a continuation of that same love. If we love God first, then all these things will be added to us if we're called and work according to God's will,
Yeah.
and we're letting go and that whole thing. And it's a beautiful thing when we set aside everything we think we know, and then suddenly we get something we didn't realize, and then we do the same thing over again. So we continue to drop the rock, if you will, that we didn't know was a rock necessarily. And what is the saying? Those that live in glass houses shouldn't throw stones,
Throw some, yeah.
So, but if we break all the windows, then the house is gone. And you
Yeah,
had to break it one window at a time until suddenly you're suddenly in God's house because you've removed the invisible walls. And most of the prisons that we actually live in are self-made. We've
you know,
created them,
yeah.
ourselves.
I love what you said about, I always reference the paradoxes, because
Mhm.
in saying that, giving my life to Christ, there was a time when I'd look at it like, if I do this, if I give my life to Christ and live to help others and do this, well, I'm giving up stuff to do that. And it's not that. It's just the opposite. You do this for God and for Christ and for others, and all of a sudden your world just explodes with all of these cool things, and we get so much more than we ever bargained for. We
Ain't
never,
it the truth?
yeah, and you just don't even know the things that we're capable of, and most of my fear and most of my bad thoughts, I feel like, sometimes they come from a couple different places. Like I was saying, I feel like the enemy will attack when we're, doing good stuff for God. But, a lot of it comes from my own stinking thinking, my own committee. And when God gave me the gift, the greatest gift other than my relationship that I have with him, that he's given me, is knowing that I have a choice.
Hmm.
I used to think all of these bad thoughts, would say, I'm worthless, I'm no good. Well, that's just the way it is, because that's my thoughts telling me that. I went for years you're never going to amount to anything. You're just going to be an addict. You're just that, for years, not realizing that I have a choice. I don't have to believe that stuff. And that's what God showed me. And it's like, what a gift when you get those thoughts and it just starts haunting us and bringing us down and stopping us from reaching the potential God has given us, because it's based off of fear, and we're creating this fear
False
in our
evidence
own head.
appearing real.
Absolutely. And then my hardest thing is, like, I have gone back over the last year, and I am trying to live in the third step. I'm trying to live in and if you're unfamiliar with it, can I read it out of the Life Recovery Bible?
Absolutely.
The Life Recovery Bible third step is made a decision to turn our wills and our lives over to the care of God. That is a tall order if we really do it. And that's just not some things. That's not like, well, I'll give this to God because it's really big, but I'll work on this a little smaller. Well, it's too big for God. So I'm going to poke and prod and manipulate it and get on the phone and try to make it come out the way I want to do it. I am still so capable of that. And I am trying so hard. I'll get uptight and get wrapped up in myself. And that's the Tim I don't want to be. And I don't think that's the Timothy God wants me to be. So when I am really discovering how I thought I was working it really well, but after 30 years in recovery, it's like, you need to go back, and because it's not perfection. We're not perfect. We're fallible, and it's about progress, but I do know this, even after long-term recovery, I now know that there are times when I have to take action. There are things that I need to do. I need to get off my butt and I need to do this. If, I'll use an amends. That amends isn't going to happen by itself. I need to think about it. I need to put something together. I need to go in. I don't need to go in and make an amends as selfish Tim. I need to go in and make an amends as a Tim who is truly seeking forgiveness, but working a program. That's what we were saying. That's what an amends is. An amends is showing where we're not who we used to be. That's not just a hollow promise. This is, hey, I've got 30 days in. I have a sponsor. I'm working through these steps. And I want to tell you, I'm honestly so sorry for the pain I caused you. You got to put a little effort into that. And it's scary. It's scary to pick up the phone and call somebody you did wrong while you're drinking and say, can I talk to you? It's real important. They might hang up on you right there. You say,
Effort, not outcome.
Yeah. And you did it. You did it. You took the action. Now you did it and you walk away. Now, if I don't leave it to God, I'm going to get home and call him up. Well, what do you think? What do you think? You forgive me? Or I truly give it to God. And if they want to call me and say, I accept your apology and your amends, cool. And if they don't, then they don't. But that's God's place. That's not mine.
Right. Yeah. You're in charge of your side of the street.
Right.
But once we turn our will and our lives over to the care of God, really our side of the street is God's side of the street.
I like that.
We surrender it. So
I like that.
We do. It's like my sponsor always said, be the best Timothy you can be and leave the outcome up to God.
We could both do that.
Yeah. Yeah, right. We could. 1st and 2nd Timothy, and I ain't
you got
saying
that
who's
right.
older.
I love it.
Yeah. I don't know. When is your approximate birthday?
January 1st.
January 1st. Oh,
okay. I'm still a little bit shy of 30 years. So good Lord willing.
No, I don't mean your sober date, but yeah.
Oh, September 9th.
September 9th. So you're coming up on one. Okay.
Yeah.
Mine's March, end of March 57. What year?
65.
65. So I'm a bit older.
You're first, Timothy. You're first.
I'm first Timothy. Okay. We'll take it.
I love it. I love it. Man, I
My
feel like I've made a really good
Mhm.
friend today.
Amen to that. My mom was in the hospital trying to figure out what to call me, and back in the day they'd have a Bible, you know, a Gideon Bible, not just in the hotels but in the hospitals too. And she picked it up and flipped it over to Second Timothy, by the way, and said, "Oh, I think I'll call this one Timothy." And I believe that was by design, if you will, you know. And certainly she chose, but the design was there, the imprint was there. And I think when we get named, there's something to that name. Everyone should look up the linguistic roots, and Timothy, of course, you and I talked about this already. Timo is a word for honor in Greek, and theos, everyone knows theos means God. And I don't know if it's Greek or Latin actually, but it's all Greek to me. But
Ah,
anyway, as they
well,
say, is right. And but it means Timotheus is the book of Timothy was the book of Timotheus, and then they changed it to Timothy and they anglicized it and all that stuff. And but it means honor God, and in the Hebrew it means honored by God. So you know, take it
wow.
whichever way you want to, either honor God or honored by God, but it's still about God.
Yeah.
And you know, and sometimes I fall short of what I want to be and what I want to do and what I know I should do. We're all human, and we all fall short of the glory of God, if you will. But if we keep our eyes single to the glory of God, then that light will fill our bodies, you know,
Amen.
and Christ talked about it. Say, if your eye is single to God, then your eye is single to the light, your eye will fill with light. But if your eye is single to the darkness, then that's what you'll get, is more of
I
what you're looking at. So, and I've noticed in life generally, when people are seeing shadows, is because they've turned their back on the light.
oh
Yeah, and they're
yeah.
looking at their own shadow that they themselves
Wow.
created by turning their back on the light. But as soon as we face the light, the shadows might still be behind us, but we can't see them anymore. And what does that phrase say? Get thee behind me, Satan,
Get
if you
thee
will.
behind me, Satan.
Yeah,
Yeah.
get thee behind me, ego, if you will, you know. And when we're facing God, the ego tends to get minimized, and it's behind us, it's still there, but we can't see it because we're facing God, you know.
Yeah.
And I've heard of ego as ego, edging God out. And this is not
Oh,
new to you and me. We've all heard this, but it's useful to know. And ladies and gentlemen, the incomplete skeptic, sober, wise guy, you know, we did a lot of God talk today, and we don't always
yeah.
go there. But I'm really glad we did today. And I feel like there's some episodes where we need to make God front and center. We have a gentleman here today who has a recovery ministry. He sings praises to God. And if they wanted to come and see you, where could they see you?
Oh, well, let's see. When does this air?
Probably within a week,
Okay,
maybe a few days.
this Sunday, I will be at Community Hope Fest in Elk River. It's a big giant
Elk River,
festival.
Minnesota. Okay.
Yeah, at Sherborne Fairgrounds. I'll be there with a full band. And this is a big free faith-based festival. A lot of people are there from recovery, and
Cool.
free admittance,
Okay.
free
Okay.
food.
What's
It's
the
gonna
name of
be
your band?
it's Timothy Mark Price.
Okay.
And then I'm in Chaska at New Creation Ministries on Monday. And then next week I'm at Frogtown Recovery Cafe. And
Oh, nice.
yeah, I go to celebrate recoveries, and you
Mm-hmm.
know what? I go
Mm-hmm.
anywhere God wants me to go.
Amen.
We go to these places, and the ministry runs off of donations, so we don't charge,
Okay.
because it seems the people who need it the most, usually, we get into the trenches. We got back from Nashville last month, went to a men's shelter downtown, and you know, you can really see how they need it there, but they can't afford it,
Mm-hmm.
so but
Mm-hmm.
it's like,
Did you
we're
happen to see John McAndrew while you're down there?
no, I didn't.
Oh,
I
okay.
didn't. I'm not even sure who that is.
Oh, he has a music ministry as well, and
Really?
he comes up here and sings occasionally. He used to live in St. Paul,
Okay.
and in my early days at the Recovery Church, he was frequenting, and then, but he ended up going down to Nashville, and
Very
so
cool.
I just wondered, yeah, I'll try to
I'd
send you
love
a
that.
link on Facebook or something.
Yeah.
So,
So we go all over the place. We've got
okay,
a weekly Thursday night recovery service in New Prague.
okay,
And
okay,
we study the life, we go through the Life Recovery Bible. We do a speaker meeting the second Thursday of every we meet Thursdays
okay.
at 6 o'clock. And we have a big giant picnic coming up on August 24th. We're gonna
Wow,
have
you're busy.
it's gonna be fun. We have food, we have barbecue, we have I'll be playing, and that's part of Faith Recovery and Music, and it's
Nice.
all free. We do this, we invite the community, just so people know that we're out there, and we get a lot of people from the different churches and the recovery community, and it's kind of cool because we all stand together then, you know.
Nice.
So
Well, I have a sober date coming up this month, so maybe
oh,
I'll be able to find one. So
oh
yeah,
wow.
yeah.
When is it?
Well, I got out of prison August 17th of 90. I drank the 18th, and by a miracle, I didn't get busted and sobered up August 19th of 90. So we've got
Wow.
about the same amount of sobriety. I'll have 1 year for every bone in my spine now. We
Oh
have
my
33
goodness.
bones in our, so
That's so awesome, Timothy. That man, I sure enjoyed this. I hope it was okay. I wound up telling a lot of my story, you know.
no, that's what it's all about, brother. And
You know,
do you have a website or
yeah,
something?
actually,
Okay.
I've got two of them if I can give them to you. I've got
Sure.
uh,
And I'll put it in my feed as well at some point, but what is it?
it's www.timothymarkprice.com,
Okay.
and there's www.faithrecoverymusic.com. And
Nice.
that has this is where you're going to get to return the favor. That has like where we're going to be, where we're giving presentations, what's going on in the recovery community, a lot of videos, some insight. It has my story, and the ability to contact us if you want us to come up and do something, and you're worried about paying us. Don't worry about that. We'd
We'll
love to come
figure it
and
out.
do it. It's where
Cool.
God sends us. So and I've got a YouTube channel, Timothy Mark Price, if you want to hear the music
Oh,
and things.
okay. We'll have to subscribe to each other's channel.
That would be awesome. And
All
we're
right.
starting FRM TV, and that's where you need to come in, Timothy. You need to come in and be one
FRM
of our
TV.
guests.
Okay.
Yeah,
FRM TV. What is that?
it'll be Faith Recovery and Music Television, and we've
Got
got
it.
a Faith
Nice.
Recovery and Music YouTube channel. So we'll be doing it right here. This is our set, actually.
Okay. Well, I
So
won't sing. I'll spare everyone
you
that,
don't
but
need
if
to
you ever,
sing.
okay.
Want you to come in and talk about your ministry or what
Okay.
you're doing and share about yourself. It's all about the
Oh,
guests who
nice.
come in.
Cool. Well, I didn't expect that. Of course, that'd be an honor and a privilege.
You got to come to New Prague.
All right, I can handle that. I have a car, God willing, it still works. So, all right, brother. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in to the Incomplete Skeptic. And Sober Wise Guy is the name of this particular series. So hopefully we'll see you back. You know what they say, like and subscribe. Check us out on YouTube and check out my brother's website as well. We'll check down in the links. We'll get them in there. Peace
Wow.
out, everybody.
Thank you. God bless.
God bless.